We're starting a new chapter of Hebrews tonight, chapter 4. But it's almost like there's no chapter division in this letter that Paul's writing. Funny about that. Because he just continues straight on from the end of the last chapter. This one's all about Sabbath rest. And you'll remember, let's read this paragraph here, you'll remember from this. Even though Yahuah swore in his rage, remember that? That the first generation of Israel would never enter into his rest because of the wilderness rebellion and unbelief. Remember that? His promise of supernatural rest still remains for some to experience. Still remains. How do we know that? Because right off the bat, Hebrews chapter 4, Paul says, so, since a promise still remains to enter into his rest, let's be fearful in case some of you fall short of entering it. For the good news of deliverance was indeed brought to us, as well as to them, Israel. But the word which they heard did not profit them, for it wasn't mixed with belief in those who heard it. Very important, mixing the word with belief. For we who have believed do enter that rest. As Elohim has said, as I swore in my rage, if they will enter into my rest, even though his works and wonders were complete from the foundation of the world. His works and wonders were complete from the foundation of the world, which he rested from on the seventh day. For somewhere he said this about the seventh day, and Yahuah rested on the seventh day from all his works. And he also said this, if they will enter into my rest. If. So, ever since then, ever since when? The beginning. Ever since the beginning, it remains for some to enter into it. But those who formerly received the good news did not enter in because of disobedience. Elohim again defines a certain day. Today, even saying through David later on, today if you hear his voice, do not harden your heart. Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. So if Yahuah had indeed already given them rest, he would not have spoken of another day coming after that, would he? If he'd already given it to them. So this means that there still remains a rest for the people of Elohim. For the one who has entered into rest has also rested from his own works, just as Elohim rested from his own works in creation. So then, let us do everything we can. Let us strive to enter into that rest, so that no one falls into the same example of disobedience like they did. That's the scripture tonight. Interesting? A rest still remains. Paul's going to prove this to us. He says, so since a promise still remains to enter into his rest, let us fear in case any of you come short of it. So what is this rest that Paul speaks of? That Yahuah previously said his first bride would never enter into. I swear in my rage they will never enter into his rest. And they died in the wilderness rebellion. What is this rest? Is it a physical land of promise of Israel as given to the patriarchs? Is that what the rest is? The promised land of rest? Hardly. Since most of the Hebrews who Paul was addressing here in this letter, most of the Hebrews who Paul was addressing already lived in this promised land, already lived in this land promised to Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. So, can't be that, can it? Can't be the promised land because they're already living in the promised land. He's talking to Hebrews in Jerusalem, So it was merely, was it merely, what is this rest? Is it merely observing the weekly Sabbath of rest? Many would say yes. There's footnotes in the 𝗪𝗪 that say yes. That's what this scripture is talking about, resting on the Sabbath. Many would say yes. This rest that Paul talks about is all about the Sabbath day. And Paul explores this as we go on in the chapter. However, most of these Hebrews already rested from sunset Friday until sunset Saturday. Whether they were being true obedient or just Jewish custom, they're still resting on the Sabbath. So they're already doing that. Yet Paul states that a promise of rest still remains for us to enter into, and even fears that some may never find it. So it can't be any of these components by themselves, can it? It can't be the promised land, the literal land of Israel. It can't be that. It can't be the Sabbath day only. It can't be that. That is a day of rest, and we rest. We get rested. But that can't be what he's talking about here. It must be another different experience altogether. Then he says, let us fear. Let us fear. Paul says, let us around 13 times. Paul says, let us around 13 times in Hebrews, impressing upon these believers the absolute necessity of remaining true to Yahusha Messiah. Is Paul alluding to Yahuah's language of creation here? Let us. When Elohim said, let us make man in our image, that can be confusing, can't it? How can there be only one if he says, let us make man in our image? That let us, if you look at that sentence in Hebrew, it's all Elohim. Elohim in our image. And it's not talking about plurality there. It's talking about mighty, uber, massive, powerful. Those notes are left there. So it's not talking about let us as in multiple people. It's talking about massive, uber, powerful. We saw the resulting spoken word bringing things into existence from nothing through his work and effort, all in the beginning. Or was it a reference to Genesis 10 and 11 where we saw the let us of rebellious mankind make a name for ourselves in building a great tower in complete hatred and defiance to Yahuah Elohim? Great fear fell upon the early assembly in the obvious judgment of Yahusha against Ananias and Sapphira's sin. Remember when we went through that? They held back money for the property they sold, and they, lied to Peter. Yeah, it was Peter. Lied to Peter, and the husband and wife got struck dead. Remember that? Great fear fell upon the early assembly. Well, likewise, the bride today needs a scriptural and healthy fear of Yahusha, which includes respect, in order to judge and check herself to see if she is indeed entering into rest. Can you see that? This is what Yahusha is doing with us today. Need to check ourselves to see if we are entering into this rest. It needs to be mixed with belief. For the good news of deliverance was indeed brought to us as well as to them, but the word which they heard did not profit them, for it wasn't mixed with belief in those who heard it. So was the word a failure? Moses preached the good news of deliverance from the bondage of Egypt through the blood of the Passover lamb. And the whole purpose was for the whole purpose of entering Yahuah's rest. That was the whole purpose of the message of deliverance, to go from bondage to the promised land of rest. Yes, the land of promise was explained and declared, just as it had been declared to Abraham, the good news of the seed, Yahusha, who would bless all the nations of the earth. This gospel, this good news was preached by Moses through signs, wonders, miracles, confirming his word as truth. The good news here was the Feast of Tabernacles in Canaan. That was where they were heading, to be able to do the final proper instruction in the promised land. You couldn't do tabernacles in the wilderness. There was no fruit, no harvest. Likewise, the new covenant message of rest is preached by Messiah Yahusha and his apostles, and also confirmed as truth with signs and wonders and miracles. What was Yahusha's whole ministry involved with? Full of signs and wonders and miracles, wasn't it? The gospel to Yisrael spoke of the land of rest, the literal temporal blessings, but it was a shadow of the heavenly rest, supernatural blessings in Yahusha. This promised land, as we've discussed many times, was a promise, a shadow of what we would become as his bride. Our body is the temple, and where the temple is the fellowship. It's the promised land. And of course, we're looking for the final promised land that's coming. Yet the word given did not profit Israel. The word given by Moses did not profit Israel. So much preaching of the word, so much, yet the hearers received no profit. How much of the word was preached in the Gospels and the book of Acts by Yahusha? How much of the word was preached in the Gospels and the book of Acts by Yahusha and his followers? And how little, if any, profit for most who heard it. The word on its own will profit no one unless it is mixed with belief in those that hear it. We can be here every week listening and learning, reading every day if we could be bothered to, in the word every day. But if it's not mixed with belief, if you're not believing what you're reading, if you can be bothered to read the word, if you don't even believe it, what's the point? There is nothing wrong with the living word. It was the hard hearts that the seed landed on that held the rebellion and unbelief. Just like today. That's what he's doing in our family. That's what he's doing in our fellowship. That's what he's doing with his bride. And the more you chat with people, you realise, the genuine ones, that's what he's doing all over the world in people. So we might think, oh, we can't get it together ever. You talk to other people, they're going through the exact same things in their families. Trying to come together as a fellowship, trying to come together as a family, trying to put off the world, overcome, get into the word. Everybody's going through this. Yahusha is doing a work in his bride, if they will enter in. So we know there's a rest. We don't know what it is, but if they will enter in. For we who have believed do enter into that rest. As he has said, as I swore in my wrath, if they will enter into my rest. Even though his works were finished from the foundation of the world. His works, the works that he did in creation and everything that he established, he finished them on the sixth day, didn't he? Finished. It was perfect. It was good. In other words, it was perfect. He doesn't do anything unless it's perfect. His works were finished from the foundation of the world, which he rested from on the seventh day. So there's a rest there, a type of rest. We cannot enter into rest without belief. There was nothing that Israel could do when it came to getting themselves out of Egypt, was there? They'd been waiting for 400 years. Most of them had given up hope. The older ones were still reminding them about a prophecy from Abraham that we'll be delivered to the promised land. Most of the younger ones couldn't have cared less. They were slaves, forgotten about it, couldn't do anything about it, couldn't get themselves out of Egypt. Elohim did it all. He dealt with the Egyptians. He sent the plagues. He opened the Red Sea. Everything else was the manifestation of his power and might. What could Israel do? Nothing. All Yahuah wanted from them, all Yahuah wanted them to do was believe and enter in. I'll do the rest. You believe and enter in. You can see it happening. There's fire, there's storms, there's death of the firstborns, there's blood, there's locusts, there's the sea opening. I'm doing all of it through Moses' staff. He's doing all of it. You just have to believe and enter in. Yahuah would put fear upon the enemy nations in Canaan also when Joshua went through. The same promise was there. Yahuah would put the fear upon the enemy nations in Canaan as Israel entered it. This is proven when that last generation did eventually enter in under Joshua. Yahuah put the fear upon Jericho and caused the walls to fall flat. What could Israel do apart from do what you're told? Walk around, blow your shofars, do what you're told to do. Yahuah did everything. All Israel had to do was trust and obey, because that's what this is believing. Trust and obey. This is believing. This is faith. That's what it is. Trust and obey. Yahuah for everything. That's what it is. So Paul is saying that there is a spiritual rest, a spiritual rest available, which the believer may enter into here and now. Like a crown. We've talked about the crown, haven't we? You can start experiencing that now. There's a literal rest here and now, which that literal rest of Canaan was a type and shadow of. This is a type and shadow of the rest that we can enter into. And Paul uses this very historical incident of Israel to prove it. Can't read tonight. Paul uses this very historical incident of Israel to prove it. Note how Paul always takes the historical accounts and draws from it the supernatural application for the true bridal assembly today. Notice how he does that. Takes the literal shadows, feasts, practices, agricultural, rest, promised land, turns them into supernatural application for the bride today. Supernatural rest is found in following Yahusha. And where did he go? To his death, the death of self. Is death pleasant? Is death painful? You've got to want to go there. If we do want to go there, if we hate ourselves enough to die and put ourselves on that stake and follow him to his death, the apostles did not love their life until the death, it said. They were willing to sacrifice everything they thought they were, friends, family, ego, everything, because they'd seen the risen King. And this was true to them, this scripture. Yahusha said, "Come to me, all you who labour and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Everything in life is heavy laden. The longer you spend in life, the heavier it is. The more labour, toil, hard work you do. Yahusha says, "I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you." If you don't know what a yoke is, see this thing here? The cows, the cattle used to put their head through that one. The other cow would put their head through that one. And it would keep them on the path. It's a yoke. They called it a yoke. And some of them, if they were cruel taskmasters, this thing would be really heavy. And the cows would be working really hard. Yeah? The bulls and everything. But Yahusha says, because this is an agricultural society, he says, my yoke is light. My teaching, my instruction, the yoke that keeps you on the path from the bullocks just going off and doing their own stupid thing, the sheep wandering off. My yoke is light. Learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for yourselves. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Do you know that? Yahusha's way is easy. If you believe him, if you trust and believe, his way is light and easy. Yahusha said this to a Jewish nation that professed belief in all the divine Torah laws. So they're doing all the Torah laws, apparently, all the words given to Moses, plus 614, 13, however, whatever the hell they'd done. They're doing all these laws that were apparently the right thing to do, and yet Yahusha tells them, come to me for rest. Yahusha said this to a Jewish nation that were doing all the divine Torah laws, yet they had no rest or peace, no healing or deliverance. For he is the catalyst. He is the Torah of Moses. He is all that. You can't do all this if you don't have him. You don't have him if you don't have his name. You don't have his spirit if you don't have his name. His name is Yahusha, nothing else. If you don't have Yahusha, what's the point of all this? Because he is all this. Yes, Yahusha offers this supernatural experience, but we must believe and enter into him daily. Not just blind obedience to ink on a page, hoping we even understand it, but the opening up of ourselves to his voice and responding to his prompts, even as Joshua and Caleb believed and entered Canaan's rest. What's the first thing What's the first thing you think when your eyes flicker open, or even before your eyes flicker open of a morning? What's the first thing you think? Is it about Yahusha? Is it good morning, Yahusha? I love you, Yahusha. I'll spend some time with you, Yahusha, whether it be in his word, whether it be thinking quietly, thinking about him, talking to him. Willing to start your day with Yahusha? Not as a religious ritual. You can do this any time of the day. You're supposed to do it all day, every day. He's in every thought, isn't he? Wouldn't it be nice if we spent time with Yahusha? We certainly know how to spend time with the world, don't we? Even though his works were finished from the foundation of the world. His works. This rest was actually finished right from the foundation of the world. Everything that he established was done all the way back there in Genesis, before Genesis, because it's who he is. But he waits for someone to enter in by belief in his finished work. He's waiting. There is the rest of Yahuah in creation, which came at the close of a finished work. Seventh day, rested, finished. And there is also the rest of Yahusha in redemption, which comes at the close of a finished work also through his blood. The seventh day Sabbath of rest was indeed established in the creation week also, and is a wonderful delight to encounter, isn't it? Wonderful resting. One day a week you can do nothing. Sabbath, wonderful. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. The Jews do Sabbath, and yet they hate Yahusha. So clearly, just like Yahusha's name, the Sabbath command has lost its power, and a deeper experience of rest in Yahusha's spirit is required to activate the bride's maturity. Does that make sense? Just like Yahusha's name has become powerless through religious people and maniacs, so is the Sabbath command. Oh, we rest on the Sabbath though. Yeah, but look at your behaviour. You don't even believe in Yahusha. You don't even believe, you're too busy going on about Yahuah only. Too busy with all the doctrines and whatnot. Rest is not just something you do, it's something you feel. Rest, peace, joy. In the Hebrew, it's shalom, an overall sense of wellness, well-being, health, prosperity, protection, healing, everything. The Hebrews summed it up in one word. It was called shalom. Some even think that that's what Yahusha yelled out on the stake. Shalom. Finished, complete. Rest from creation. Yahuah rested. For somewhere, Paul continues, somewhere he said this about the seventh day. And Yahuah rested on the seventh day. Notice how it's funny. I'm just thinking now. Notice how Paul doesn't give them chapter and verse. Notice in the first scroll that Moses wrote about the creation account given in Genesis, notice he's not into nitpicking and like they all do today. Where's the scripture for that? Notice he just says, somewhere, you go and find it if you want to know. Somewhere it says this about the seventh day. Somewhere it says this. Yahuah rested on the seventh day from all his works. And he also said this, if they will enter into my rest. See the association he's making between the seventh day of rest? Yahuah did it. So ever since it remains for some to enter in, but those who formerly received the good news did not enter in because of disobedience. So Paul is now moving on from the rest of Canaan. He associated the shadow of Canaan land. He's now moving on from that to the rest of creation. The rest of Canaan land was for Israel and was Yahuah's rest for them. But here in creation, it is Elohim's rest. In Genesis, we see Elohim at work. He works for 6 days, then he stopped and rested the seventh day. He set it apart, he blessed it, and rested in it. This was Yahuah Elohim's work in creation, the creative week, the beginning. That's why I believe it is still there for us to observe, because it's who he is. No matter what language you turn his words into, or Old Covenant, New Covenant, whatever, what have you, this is who he is. He rested. Was it just for an example for us, or was it just who he is? He worked 6 days and he rested on the seventh. All this was about Elohim, though, and who he is. Nothing to do with us. He rested, it says. There's nothing of mankind in it. Man was created the 6th day, and then the 7th day Yahuah rested. A cessation of work is what it means. The old creation was finished, and this became a shadowing forth, as seen in Exodus 31, which is where Yahuah taught Israel by the manna to work 6 days, and the 7th day was to be a Sabbath day of rest. Just as he did, some would say by example, but actually it's just who he is, as I said. First thing he did when they came out of Egypt, riddled with paganism, was get them back into the 7-day cycle. And nothing teaches you more about doing what Yahuah tells you to do than hunger, is it? If you don't do what I tell you to do, you'll starve on the 7th day. On the 6th day, take double the amount of manna for the 7th day. The creative week of Yahuah makes way and is shadowed forth in the week of mankind's redemption. The creative week, Yahuah's week of creation, it's like a shadow of mankind's redemptive week, what's happening with us. The fact here is that sin broke Yahuah's rest. Yahuah was resting, and then sin entered. Sin broke Yahuah's rest. When mankind sinned, Yahuah's rest was finished. And so was man's rest in the finished and creative works. When sin came in, there was no more rest. Yahuah got to work straight away, slaughtering animals, preparing garments of flesh for them to skin, for them to wear, sacrificing system of blood. He got straight to work to teach them about deliverance then, didn't he? There was no rest for Yahuah after that, and no rest for mankind either. They were kicked out of the garden. They had to work, didn't they? Elohim went back to work and is working for 6 days in the week of redemption. Remember that 6,000 years? For a day to Yahusha, a day to Yahuah is as 1,000 of our years. So for 6,000 years now, Elohim has been working towards man's redemption. This is why Yahusha, when he came along as the image of the Son, Father and the Son image, he said, "My Father works and so do I." He also said, "Father, I have finished the work you gave me to do." But after 6,000 years, Yahusha's spirit will cease to work. That's a scary thought. After 6,000 years, Yahusha's spirit will cease to work, cease to strive, put up with, convict mankind of their sin at the close of this time. The door will be shut. Man is living in the last of the last days, the very close of the 6th redemptive day, when Yahushua will return to usher in a new creation of heaven and earth and enjoy another Sabbath day of rest, specified as 1,000 years. Satan will be bound in the bottomless pit. There will be no sin, no sickness, no death, no devil, no sinners, but all will be peace and righteousness and rest in the marriage of the Lamb. So it won't just be a rest for us. Yahusha's looking forward to this too. He's been working for 6,000 years. How long have we been working? 30 odd years maybe for me. 6,000 years he's been working. He's looking forward to this Sabbath, isn't he? There can only be ultimate rest when there's an end of sin, and eternal righteousness is ushered in. And when Satan, the author of sin, is bound, when Satan, the author of sin, is bound, this will be ultimate rest indeed. So this is another area of rest we're looking at, like this is an anticipatory rest that's coming for us. This is yet another layer of rest that all of Yahusha's bride hope to attain, don't we? The first resurrection, to be part of the bridal company that's wise, enters into the marriage supper. This is the rest that remains for the people of Yahusha, a rest that the Hebrews were warned about in case they fall short of it and not be counted worthy to enter into this rest. The same warning is applicable today to all believers. It was foreshadowed in creation, Yahuwah's rest, and also in the history of Israel concerning the land of Canaan rest, wasn't it? And now stares us straight in the face. Will we enter in or forfeit the rest like the first bride? Not only the physical land, but also the spiritual rest. Because without belief, it is impossible to please Yahusha or enter. And we know he will have a people for himself. So will you make it? That's the question. Are you willing to enter into that rest? Strive to enter into that rest? You can start having it now. It doesn't take hard work. It takes belief to believe that you can have it, and you just enter in and have it. Elohim again defines a certain day. Today. When? Now. Today. Even saying through David later on, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. When? Today. Now. I said now. The time is limited. He hears us only in the accepted time. That door is about to be shut, just like the ark. Time is limited. Now is the day of deliverance. Now is the accepted time. It is a limited time and a certain day. If we do not enter in within this limited day, today, then it will be too late and we'll miss out. There is no second chances. Every today that we're given with Yahusha, they all add up. If you ignore him today, then he comes to you again tomorrow, comes again the next day, the next day. If you keep ignoring him, it's not today anymore, is it? You miss out. You are not a wise virgin. You don't have all that oil that you could be accumulating through saying, yes, I believe. Yes, I'll throw that off. Yes, I'll say that. Yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll believe this. And all those yeses today add up to being a wise virgin. I said now. So here Paul brings in David, because that psalm there is from David. Today, if you will hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. David said that. Why is he bringing in David now? Let it be noted also that David is with the nation in the land of Canaan rest, and the time is about 500 years after they'd entered with Joshua. So if Israel is already in the promised land of peace and rest, then why does David speak of entering into this rest? Even David's talking about a rest. The fact is that David, under the inspiration of the Spirit, saw the past historical failure of Israel to enter into the land. Then he takes it and applies it to his own generation in a warning. Warning them that although they were now in the literal Canaan land of rest, they could miss out on entering into the true supernatural rest. Even David knew about this. The true rest which Elohim had intended for his people to experience, of which the land of Canaan was merely an earthly shadow. And everything to do with it, the feasts, instructions, everything was a shadow to be lived out in this carcass now. Though David is with Israel in the Canaan rest, he sees that this was not the ultimate rest which Elohim had in mind. This was only the typical rest, the earthly type that was prophetic of the spiritual and heavenly rest of Yahusha, and which had to be entered into supernaturally. Supernaturally into belief, supernatural experience, isn't it? This is a different type, another type of rest. Paul says, so if Yahuah had indeed already given them rest, he would not have spoken of another day coming after that, would he? If the rest was the Canaan land, which they were already in, he wouldn't be talking about it still. If the rest was the Sabbath day, which they were all doing, unlike today, he wouldn't be talking about it still, would he? What's this rest? Even under Joshua, Israel never ever fully possessed the land, even though he went in. This also ended in failure and idolatry. After Joshua's death, Israel fell into idolatry and captivity, therefore never fully entering into all Yahuah's rest for them. The possessing of the rest of Canaan meant the driving out of all the enemies. Pay attention to this. Possessing the rest of Canaan, shadow, meant driving out all the enemies. Driving out all the enemies. Likewise, the ultimate rest of Yahusha for his people, new creations on a new earth, will be the driving out of all physical and spiritual enemies. Yahusha will do that when he arrives, and Satan himself, all put under Yahusha's feet for eternity. But even now, that's something Yahusha's going to do. Even now, there is a rest through overcoming available to Yahusha's bride to have like a crown. Remember the crown of life that we can attain if we overcome? We can wear it. Sit properly, please. We're trusting you up the back. If we can't trust you, you'll have to sit back next to Mum next time, yeah? Pay attention. There's a rest that still remains. This means that there still remains a rest for the people of Elohim. For he that has entered into his rest has himself also rested from his own works, just as Elohim rested from his own works. The word rest here is Sabbath in Hebrew. It means a cessation from work. Stop work. To cease from all physical exertion. Pause the self. So in a sense, the creation, the Canaan land with all its laws, of which the Sabbath was one of them, it's almost like a shadow. Ceasing the self, resting on the seventh day is like a shadow of something better to have. Doesn't mean we don't do the Sabbath day every seventh day, but it's like a shadow for something greater. We can also see how ceasing the self can also open us up to a deeper relationship of rest and peace with our Master supernaturally. And that's every day. We can be entering into a rest if we kill the self, cease the self. Ceasing from works, as Yahuah did from his. Elohim worked in creation, then ceased from his works and entered into a rest of Sabbath. Israel in Egypt was full of fleshly habits and works. From the works of Egypt to the rest of Canaan meant a journey from bondage into liberty, all through the power of the deliverance message under Moses. And so the Hebrew believers had left their works and lifestyle of bondage behind, escaped from them, and were supposed to enter into Yahuwah's rest in Canaan. That's the whole purpose of us today, repenting and being immersed, receiving his Spirit, so that we can go on to rest, maturity. If we don't, then all this was pointless. We have to stop the following fleshly works if we want to experience true rest. We have to stop, 1, works of the flesh. Now, Yahuah didn't have any of these works, and yet he still stopped all the work that he was doing and rested. We have to stop all these works of the flesh. They have to be ceased. These are the works of the unregenerate man, the old man, the one outside of Yahusha, outside of rest. Now pay attention to this. This has to be killed. This has to be out of our lives, out of our homes, marriages, businesses, family, fellowship. All this has to leave. The works of the flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery, whoring, uncleanness, indecency, idolatry, witchcraft, drug sorcery, hatred, quarrels, arguing, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, strife, fighting, heresies, false teachings, envyings, murders, drunkenness, wild parties, and the like, of which I tell you before, as I told you in the past, that anyone who does such things will not inherit the kingdom of Elohim. All those things. Now, all those things are not inside every single one of us, but as a family, as a fellowship, as a group, as a bride, even globally, all those things are in us. Understand that? They have to be purged. And who's going to do the purging on a daily basis? And who has to respond in belief and say, yes, I can see that. We do, yes. If we don't, we end up like they do. did. The fruit of the Spirit, that is to be replaced by the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, trustworthiness, gentleness, self-control. Against such there is no law. If you want to stick something on your wall as a reminder, stick those 9 fruits. Am I loving? Am I showing joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness? Am I trusting the people around me and also Yahusha? And am I trustworthy? Gentleness. Are you gentle? Controlling yourself. Against such there is no law. If you do those fruits, no other law can touch you. The laws of mankind are easy if you've done those. And they that are Messiahs have impaled the flesh with its affections and lusts. So if we live in the Spirit, let us also behave in the Spirit. If we have the right spirit, if we've got the right name, which has become powerless, but if we can get the power back through understanding who Yahusha truly is, if we've got the right spirit, how do we get this crown of life? How do we enter into this rest? If we live in the Spirit, let's behave in the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking, and envying one another. So even though you go through all this process, Paul still says, I fear that some of you won't make it. Even though they've got all these fruits and they're walking in the Spirit, let us not become conceited, which means they're not conceited yet. Doesn't that tell us that as we walk along and go further and further in Yahusha and we weather certain battles, we can become conceited. We can start provoking and envying one another, and we can even take on all these things here, even things that we may not have had when we came into Yahusha, because the devil's after us. Notice this? So Paul's saying, don't come into this. They have to be put off. The other thing that we have to put off is the works of self-effort. All our agendas and plans. These are the works done of the self, works of the old creation life. These works are done by the old religious self, remembering there is nothing good about us without Yahusha. All works held up to him of self are but filthy rags. For these works are not done in belief, but hearing of his word. They're not done in belief. You can't do anything good without Yahusha. Do you face that? Do you face that you are a wicked, filthy, hideous creature without Yahusha's Spirit within you? If you don't face that, why would you want to die to it? You don't want to die to something you think is perfectly fine, do you? We have to face that we are nothing. Everything we did before Yahusha met us, everything that we were, everything was wicked, filthy, an abomination, a burden on everyone around us. That's who we were before we came into Yahusha. So we have to face now that if we choose to go back, like a dog goes back to its vomit, we are useless to Yahusha. We have to hear his word, hear his thoughts, and say yes and walk on his word. The dead works of the old covenant laws, we have to get rid of those too. All the Yahuah only and the pushing the old covenant instructions and the 10 Commandments, all the time pushing it. The dead works of old covenant laws and traditions in general. They are all dead works because of themselves, nothing Yahuah does is dead, but of themselves, in other words, obeying the Torah laws without Yahusha's Spirit, without his voice, without his guidance, of themselves, all this, laws, Torah, everything is lifeless, unable to deliver anyone. No life could be earned through blind obedience to the old laws. And I explained that last week. You can be in big trouble for being obedient if you're not being obedient to the right thing, in the right context, in Yahusha's Spirit. All these works were shadowed forth in Yahuah ceasing from his creative works to enter into rest. It is not that his works were evil, but the fact of work itself stopping. He stopped all his works. So we have to stop all our works too. Works of the flesh, works of ourself, of our plans and agendas. We have to stop it all. For the bride there is repentance from dead fleshly works and habits to enter into rest in Yahusha. Then the real work of Yahusha is to believe and trust him for all we are and all we do, and then train ourselves to not be doing anything of ourselves, stubbornly demanding to dig our heels in and do things our own way. Is Yahusha getting our attention tonight? Just showing us what he wants? He wants us to be in him, in love, joy, peace, rest. He wants that back in our family. So let's enter into that rest. Let us do everything we can. Let us strive and labor to enter into that rest so that no one falls into the same example of disobedience. Let us therefore labor to enter into that rest. This is certainly an apparent contradiction, isn't it? To have to labor to rest, to strive, work and battle to rest. Which is it? Strive, working and laboring, or resting? Which is it? It means to strive diligently in this verse. And it also links itself up with the call of Yahusha, our great apostle and high priest, when he said in Matthew 11, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for yourselves." Not only will he give rest if we come to him, but we will find ultimate rest as we learn of him and who he really is, and how uniquely, often bizarrely different he wants us to behave, which of course is all outside of the ink of the written text. It's all in between the lines, listening to his voice. We have to know that Yahusha is Elohim today. The Jews were laden down with the yoke of bondage and rigid laws, with its ritual, ceremonies and works. They were laboring to obtain rest for the being, but there was no rest under the old covenant law. They didn't have the supernatural component required to love Yahusha's words of life. Didn't have it. What was the supernatural component? His Spirit, for those of us who are awake. His Spirit. It was an endless toil, endless labor, and endless work that never finished or delivered anyone from evil. So let's enter into his rest. Yahusha comes and invites all who are laboring to come to him, and he will give them rest. It will be supernatural rest for his immersed bride, and an ending of the dead works of the law. The blind obedience without the Spirit or real relationship. You can't do any of these if you don't have a relationship. You can't even love them or know them or behave any of it. Yahusha is Elohim, the end of the law of works, which is unnecessary, pointless, repetitive, religious behavior, meaning that the law and the prophets and the feasts all point to him. They all culminate in him and are all fulfilled and completed in him. They are him. All of the old stuff is him. So if we are following him and his behavioral example of love, we are doing all that is required within the old laws. Understand that? So today, the spiritual labor, the battle to overcome and run our race to enter into that rest, it's against principalities, it's against powers and wicked spirits in heavenly high places. Yahusha is our supernatural Joshua. Interestingly, they both have the same name in Hebrew. In Hebrew, Joshua is actually Yahusha. Yahusha is our supernatural Joshua. And if we follow him through his life, fulfilling all the words and feasts, going to his death, Yahusha did, he will lead us into the true rest so that no one falls. Remember, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the spiritual forces of evil. Are you aware of that? Every day when you wake up with your head on your pillow, do you strap on your armor every morning, knowing there's going to be some form of battle? Or is every single thing that comes against you an inconvenience? The word fall here, what are we talking about? No one falls. Paul says, strive so that no one falls. The word fall here is the same word used of Satan falling. And the foolish man who built his house on the sand, falling through unbelief. The same example is given to us concerning Israel. These things happened to them for types and examples for us in the end of the age. Let's start to wrap this up. What is this rest? You getting all the pointers of what the rest is? There's a creation rest, there's a Canaan land rest, Sabbath day rest, and yet Paul's still talking about a different rest. When Paul states that there still remains a rest for us to enter into, he is no way referring to the seventh day Sabbath rest, which Yisrael was already doing. And to declare the resolve of his words as such is unbelievably immature. Oh, the word Sabbath there, the word rest is there, Sabbath rest. Oh, okay, it must be talking about the seventh day Sabbath. Very immature to just read it as that. Because as I said, they're already doing the Sabbath. We cannot argue with the 7-day cycle, and we cannot argue with Yahusha's desire for us to observe his set-apart day of rest. So no one's saying you shouldn't rest on the Sabbath. We acknowledge that. It's all through. He taught them in the wilderness with the manna. It's in his instructions. It's the fourth commandment. He did it. He told us to do it. We rest on the seventh day, sunset to sunset. No one's arguing that. But that's not what it is that Paul's talking about. There is a whole different experience of elated joy, peace, and rest for the bride to experience. Yet it is supernatural and must be entered. What have you all been saying on and off for the last 5 or so months since our elders went off travelling? The elated joy. Is that in our home? Peace, rest for the bride. Something felt like it's been missing from our fellowship? Plenty of things, but that's what I'm referring to right now. Elated joy. Isn't that what you find from our elders whenever you see them? Happiness. A constant standard of behaviour. Not one day hate you, next day love you. Not wondering where you stand with them. That's how we have to become, isn't it? We're the priests of our home. We haven't been that example for you all. We have to face that. There's a whole different experience of elated joy. And I'm talking to all the brothers and sisters out there too, because everybody in the whole world who's the true bride is going through this experience. Are you an example of elated joy, peace and rest for your family, for your children, husband, wife, congregation, fellowship? Whole different experience to enter into, yet it's supernatural, but it must be entered. Understand that? That's what the rest is, the fruit of the Spirit. And not just being able to quote it, do it in every situation. To have the love, the joy, the peace, the patience, to get to the point where that is the most important thing in your day, where the minute you flicker open your eyes, you're ready to try and maintain that all day. And if you fail, pick yourself up. Okay, we'll try better next time. To be able to put your head on the pillow at the end of the day and say, I didn't do anything. I didn't hate anybody. I did everything Yahusha asked me to do. That's the goal. To have a relationship with Yahusha from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to sleep. And all our lives are very different. And he talks to us on what we do. And you know if you've done the right thing or the wrong thing. Even the thoughts that you have. Because if you're not doing that, then your way must be more appealing. Your flesh, your life, your personality, who you think you are, must be better. It mustn't be worth killing, must it? Because if you hated it like Yahusha hates that component of us, the flesh component, the ego, the sin, the lust, the flesh, all that, if we saw it how Yahusha saw it, we'd kill it in a heartbeat, wouldn't we? Because I believe everybody in this room loves Yahusha. So we have to fight. That's why it's a battle, isn't it? I want to finish with a few of these quotes that Christopher put up last week. Yahuah said his covenant is an everlasting word forever. And he said, I never change. But when the covenant was broken by Israel, he did change and he became Yahusha, a new creation, instructing us to follow him. Follow him. Where did he go again? To his death. Can we feel true rest or peace outside of him? The love of Yahusha does not exist outside of his words. So, let's bring this close to our family. If your conversation is outside of his words, they are not his love, and you will not have the river of life flowing through you. You won't be in Yahusha's rest. See how important it is now to be communicating the right way to each other? And you know it, especially now that I'm telling you about it. You'll know it. If you say something wrong, you'll feel it. You can't blame the person you said it to. Oh, they made me, they said this and they made... No, you're the one feeling it. You're the one who did it. Human love is not of Yahusha. It is only a fragment of the bliss that comes to a believer's heart by communicating with Yahusha from the portal on our hearts. I want everyone to enter into this. Human love, which we all have for one another, husbands, wives, children, that's human love. That has no part of the love of Yahusha, because they all feel like that, hopefully, those that do, in the world. Human love has no part of the love of Yahusha. His love can only be experienced through his Spirit. How many people do you know that have his Spirit? Not many. You can only have his Spirit through obedience to the word. The love of Yahusha surpasses any experience on earth. It is intoxicating and you just want more. So you actually put off anything that gets in the way to stop you receiving it. It is constant bliss no matter what. Got it? If you're feeling constant bliss and suddenly you feel a dagger and you feel like crap, that's Yahusha letting you know, don't like that thought, don't like that word, don't like that behavior. But are you that conscious? Are you that conscious enough walking along? Or are you just an open vessel to whatever thoughts that come along? So, what habits do you need to put off and surrender? What habits do you need to put off and surrender? Throw on the altar of fleshly sacrifice in order to enter the rest Yahusha offers. This is what it all... I know it was a lot of words tonight, but this is what it all comes down to. What habits do you need to put off and surrender? From the big ones to the small ones. Throw on the altar of fleshly sacrifice in order to enter this rest Yahusha offers. He says, come to me. Oh, but I've got to go and bury them. Let them bury themselves. I've got to go and... No, don't worry. You come and follow me. What is in your way? Whatever it is that's in your way should be pulled out of you tonight at the altar so you can be free and happy. Do you understand that? All of us as a family need to come to this place, yeah? Those of us who are in the room right now, I believe, are genuine for Yahusha. Those of us who are not in the room right now, I believe, are in a battle. And it does not look like they're winning. But that's not for us to judge. We can still see. I'm working with you guys here in this room because I love you and you need to come this far, yeah? You need to enter into this rest so that we can be this shining light for others. Understand? So the altar is open. Get everything out of your way. Confess it to Yahusha. Hallelujah. Be honest and genuine and let him wash you clean. Let me stop that. Thank you, Yahusha, for moving among us tonight. We love you so much. We thank you that everything you do is good and you are healing and bringing our family together, restoring the joy and the peace and the health and everything to us. Everything you do is good. And we love you so much, Yahusha. Let us enter more into your rest and your forgiveness and your peace and your joy for this whole week. We love you, Yahusha. So be it. Have a wonderful week, everybody. Enter into the rest. It's a supernatural experience. So be it.